I'm gonna stand next to you if you want to stand there. Just so then your audio picks up. I'll let those two people sign in. Turn. Yeah, it's a few minutes past, isn't it? I was looking at my. We'll let these people sign in and we'll get started.
That's the nice thing about computers and watching.
Yes, it's the right time. Yeah. Feel free to pull a chair up too, guys, if you want to.
Yeah. Why don't you, Dan, why don't you leave your chair and then he can sit there and you can pull a chair up. Perfect.
Mhm.
It's okay. He's sat through it a number of times.
My charger. All right, welcome everybody. We're going to get started. It's noon. My name is Brittany and I'm the coordinator for the Crow Wing County Master Gardener Volunteer Program. And today we are both in person and on Zoom. So we have people joining us both online and here today. We have Jennifer Lee speaking today. Jennifer Lee joined the Master Gardener Volunteer Program in 2019. She is the current president of the program. She is the co-chair of the Community Giving Project, which is multifaceted, and she co-leads the Giving Garden and Adult Gardening 101, which is a 13-week class and takes place at the Northland Arboretum. Her interests are helping to educate others in gardening while providing fresh produce to organizations and helping to reduce food insecurity throughout Crow Wing County. And one of our most common questions that we get is how to deal with deer and rabbits. And finally, Jennifer was like, all right, I'm going to take this on. And we're excited to hear her presentation today.
Thank you, Brittany. Now, I hope you guys are not looking for a whole lot of new information. It's riveting. I will tell you, as Brittany said, being in the program since 2019, everybody has had this issue. What do I do with the deer? What do I do with the rabbits? Et cetera, et cetera. And so I thought I'm going to just research a little bit. And I started looking, and there is a ton of information, magazine information, blogs, people who just say this really works, whatever. But as a master gardener, we concentrate on research-based information. So information that other universities and institutions have already studied. So that's a lot of this information that you'll hear today. There are also a few things that I've thrown in just to kind of see if you're awake. So with that.
Jennifer, will you hit swap display? The Zoom people are seeing present.
Okay.
Oh, now these guys see it. But
okay.
Which either way, I think.
Yep. Excuse us for one moment while we have technical slideshow. How about, I'm afraid to put it into this one, but.
Do you need your presenter view? Do you have notes?
No, I'm
Okay.
fine. Okay,
Looks good on.
well,
my
it doesn't
end.
on there. Okay,
Okay.
check and
Then
let
the
me know if
recording
they're,
will look good. Yeah.
if they're good. Okay.
Okay.
So with that, today what we're going to discuss are the general information on both rabbits and deer and where they live. What's their habitat? What do you see at home? What's causing some of this? How do you identify damage? And which is deer and which is a rabbit? Creating the alternate buffet, something both in plant and placement. What are those tasty plants? Those things that you love. They're great, they're beautiful, but guess what? Deer and rabbits love them too. So what can you do to stop the damage? How can you either prevent it or deter it? So with that, a hungry deer will eat anything. And what was deer candy or deer resistant a year ago is now deer candy. And it doesn't even have to be a year ago. It could be this year. It could be something that's deer resistant, you thought in the spring, but by fall, it's deer candy. And that may happen because of two things. Deer are creatures of habit, but they move based upon their needs and their environment. If they are being pushed out of an area because of building or being relocated because something's happening, maybe a roadway is being worked on, a big building's going in, a new house where they used to sit and have their home, they're moving. Or it could be because of high population. As we know, Crow Wing County in the fall, it's pretty high population around here and they're busy, they're looking for food and it may be at your house. It is also caused because of food sources being stressed. The fact that maybe as you get closer to the end of fall, that food is no longer there, so they have to go on the hunt to find it. Deer have excellent night vision, but very, very limited day vision. So when you're looking at deer damage, most of it is going to occur in that dawn or dusk, or even through the night when their eyes can see what's going on. Okay, during the day, you might see them hopping because they're scavenging, they're looking, they're marauding, looking for their next food, but it's really a lot of the damage is happening at dawn or at dusk. And it happens in the springtime when all of those new plants are starting to bud up and show their heads, or on the trees, the budding on the trees, you're going to see that the deer are coming through a little bit more frequently. Plus, they've also just come out of, starvation mode. Deer lack upper incisors, so they can't chew, okay? They go in and they grasp. So if you look at the hosta, you will notice that it is missing some of the leaves in the hosta. It's because that deer has gone in with its head and its mouth and it has just pulled and grasped and pulled those leaves. It doesn't go in and daintily bite. No, it goes in with a full mouth grasp. And the same on the branch beside it. They will go to branches or twigs that are about an inch or less, and they will just grasp and pull. So any new leaves, new growth that are happening even on old trees, or a young tree that is just coming up, if you don't have it fenced or protected, they will go in there and grasp and pull. And the thing about deer, they can damage trees, etc., up to 6 feet. That was very interesting to me. So there are two causes for this. In the fall, as you start getting fruit on fruit trees, and you've gone out there and you've done your from the ground up, picked your apples, but there's still some fruit up there about 6 feet. The deer will find a way to get it. They can reach that height and grab down that fruit. They can also, in the winter time, if you happen to have snow and you have it banked around a tree, maybe it's blowing in there, and they see something that looks kind of good up at the top, they will just trot on up there and help themselves to the top of the tree. So again, you're not just looking at that tree down below. They're going wherever, however they can get up to 6 feet. And that is kind of an interesting thing when you start thinking about it. There's a lot of information about deer that you may not even know. In wintertime, that famous or that favorite you may have had planted outside of your house, say that 3 times, may not be quite as pretty by springtime because they like things like that. Those types of needles are easy to grasp and pull and eat and fragrant and tasty. And they love natural cedar and arborvitae. They'll go after rhododendrons azaleas and rose bushes because they're small and they're easy to grasp and eat. They love plants that also have leaves and floral things that stay on through the fall into the winter, like the coral bells. They'll eat things like that. In the spring and summer, they're going after tasty things, and you probably have seen it. Tulips, those hostas, they are definitely not deer resistant. Daylilies, okay? They will take newly planted petunias, coleus, or impatiens. They'll just walk on up and they'll just grab those babies and they will just have that's a buffet. You've invited them to the buffet. And fruit trees are susceptible to deer damage all year round. They will always, aside from spraying them or netting them, which we will discuss, if you leave them as such, you may have some damage. Vegetables such as beans and broccoli, carrot tops. That's an interesting one I didn't even realize, but carrot tops are a delight. Cabbage greens and leafy things, wonderful. Rhubarb, no, it's toxic. Now, remember what I said at the very beginning? A hungry deer will eat anything. We had a small rhubarb in our unprotected area, okay? And it was in the fall, but it wasn't, it might have been late September. I told Dan, I said, something's eating the rhubarb. You don't think so? It certainly looked like a deer.
Yeah, no, I believe you. I mean, just.
Ah,
Deadly toxic.
yes, it is dead. And so because it's toxic to deer, I don't know what happened to that deer. I didn't see any remnants left, like maybe they had a tummy ache or anything. We didn't see any of that, but we did see that there were munch marks. And whether it was that or it could have been a rabbit, but it was the way it was eaten kind of led us to believe that it was a deer. So how can I stop them? Well, plants and placement are huge. And planting aromatic herbs, mint, lavender, rosemary, chives, and parsley. Deer don't like smell. And putting those among your flowers and your veggies will help protect them. They also don't like garlic, onions, or fennel because they smell. So even putting those around the perimeter, perhaps, or the back of your garden might be helpful. And they don't like anything that has prickly, squashes or cucumbers, anything that kind of has a spine that when they're going in with their mouth, that's going to encounter into their mouth. They don't like anything as such. So they don't like root vegetables. Remember how I said carrot tops earlier? They will not necessarily go after a carrot. They'll go after the top. The only time they may go after the carrot is when that carrot has come and broken the soil, because now it's up there and now I can grab it and eat it. So while they may not go searching for a carrot, if there's one up, they may find it. Rarely damaged vegetables. Again, carrots are rarely damaged. Eggplant, leeks, peppers, tomatoes, and rhubarb. They love, or they don't love, excuse me, the pines, the larches, the cypress, those, because again, could you imagine putting your mouth around a pine limb and trying to pull it? It would leave all kinds of little pinpoints all over in your mouth. Unlike an arborvitae, which is a softer leaf or a softer branch. They don't like anything that's fuzzy. Dusty Miller is a great thing to plant in your garden if you want, because it's got the fuzziness. That's the picture at the bottom, or excuse me, at the top, excuse me. The bottom one is lamb's ear, woolly lamb's ear. Bee balm is one they don't necessarily like. Ferns, because of the amount of fuzziness with those ferns, they're not into that. So planting that will help them not go to your gardens. And placing the items that you like the most closer to an area where there's human activity is also helpful. I'm not going to say that they're still not prone to it, But if you put them at the end of your yard and there's nothing around them, guess where they're going first? Where there's nothing around them. So things where there's places where you can plant, where there's human activity, and then perhaps cover them is helpful. When Brittany sends out the email following this presentation, there will be a spreadsheet attached. It's got several tabs at the bottom. And one of the tabs is deer and plants, and it's going to be resistance and tolerance. And it started with Rutgers University, who actually put together 500 plants. Now, I've incorporated a few others, and I'll show you in 1 second, but it does show you some of the tolerance of plants, whether or not, if you plant them, just know you have to protect them and what you can do. And so out of that 500, here's a list of a few of the items that rarely get damaged. Anise, because it's got that licorice type smell. Leeks, they're not fond of. Onions, chives, no way. Well, I shouldn't say no way. If they're hungry, they'll eat it. Horseradish, that was kind of interesting. Hot peppers and tomatoes. Those are things that they're not going to necessarily go after. They love, and they will go after apples, beans, carrot tops, lettuce, that's a buffet, peas, and turnips, Swiss chard, anything that kind of has a greeny top where they can just go and grab and snack. So here is the listing of the first page of 500. Now, when I said Rutgers University, I used them as my starting point because 500, I wasn't going to be putting it together. But then I went to University of Minnesota and I said, what do they have? They don't have a list as such. They did have some items listed, but they didn't have the list like Rutgers. So then I went to Iowa State, which has a fabulous website. And as you can see, they have listed a number of the plants such as that Rutgers had. And I went to Oregon and also Penn State. And I did that because they're all zones 3 and 4, kind of where we are. Now, one thing to take into consideration is that Penn State is east. Their deer might be very different than our deer. Okay, so they might have different tastes. They might have different food supplies than we do, or they might be pushed out or might not have the population growth. So again, take it with a grain of salt. But under Rutgers University, if you look at American bittersweet, Rutgers says it's seldom severe damage, meaning pretty okay to plant. They're saying, well, what does University of Minnesota say? Well, university says it's deer resistant. Maybe that's something I should look into. If you look down at the bottom, you'll see something called autumn olive. And Rutgers says it's seldom severe damage. Minnesota DNR says do not plant. It's invasive. So if you go out east and you find autumn olive and you think that's gorgeous, I want to plant it, you don't want the DNR coming and knocking on your door because you've got an invasive plant. So some of these you take with a grain of salt but if it's invasive, I've listed that under Minnesota. But you'll be able to see whether or not something in Iowa might be something that you can plant here. One of the other tabs on the spreadsheet is North Carolina. There's a tab about North Carolina, which has an absolutely, I will tell you, fabulous website. This just happened to be one on foxglove, common foxglove. And in it, it gives you a little description of what foxglove is, etc. But if you look over to the right-hand side, it will tell you down at the bottom area, it will tell you what zones you can grow foxglove in. Okay, so if you're looking at something on that spreadsheet and you want to see can it be grown in zone 3 or 4, you're going to want to go and just double check North Carolina. And North Carolina also has interesting things where they talk about whether it's deer resistant or deer candy, whether it's rabbit resistant, maybe rabbit candy. And it also gives you some toxicity items. If it's toxic to other pets, or people, the sap might be toxic or cause, like a poison ivy type thing, itching or burning. So it gives you wonderful, wonderful information. And I highly recommend that website will be in the documents. So you can go out there, or you can Google North Carolina State Extension, and it will bring you right to their website. So what else can I do? Okay, we can plant. Well, we can put netting up. And with netting, it's a temporary drape of, fencing, mesh, whatever, over your vulnerable plants. In the bottom picture, you will notice that there are a couple of green plants coming up, and there's a very dark kind of netting covering it. That's just because then the deer can't get in there and they can't help themselves to that food. Okay, it can be removed daily. So if you have people coming over, you can remove it daily, or you can leave it on there until they're big enough and they're protected. In the upper right-hand corner, you can see some poles with some netting that are protecting those mums. That's another way, but you want to make sure that the netting itself is secure up at the top of that pole. Because if it's not, all that deer has to do is come up and kind of go, okay, and down goes the fencing, the little netting. So you just want to make sure it's always secure. And another thing, you can slant those poles, perhaps slant them a little bit out, because if the deer hits it first in its chest, it's going to be startled a little bit and it's going to back up. It's not going to necessarily go forward and eat your favorite plants. You can also do things like wraps around fences and cages. So the cage in the middle is called a cloche. It's a wonderful piece of equipment if you have a special tree or plant that you want to protect, especially if you have something coming up, a wedding, whatever, or it's just on your deck. And they're great. They're removable. They are expensive. They're not out of the price range, but you're not going to fill your entire landscape with these because it would be a little pricey, but there's something to consider. The next, the tree up in the upper right has got a wrap around it, and that's to protect the bark from the deer because it's a soft tree. It's a new baby tree, and you don't want to have that bark damaged. But if you do wrap that tree, you want to make sure that there's no moisture getting in there or no insects. So you're going to want to inspect it frequently just to make sure it's okay. The tree in the middle, you probably won't be able to see it as clearly here, but it's got some black mesh, not really mesh, but how can I describe it? Fencing, square fencing that we've just wrapped around a tree to protect it. The one thing when you're wrapping that type of mesh around the tree, leave it far enough away from the tree because you don't want it up to the tree, because guess what? They can get up there. If you leave it far enough away where their head can't get in, then you've protected your tree, or you've added a piece of protection to that tree. And here are a couple of other items. So when I was talking about leaving it far enough away, on the right hand, you will see a shrub. This was a shrub we planted and we wanted to protect it last fall. So we put up a little bit heavier wire fencing with some stakes, okay? But you will notice that the shrub itself and where the fencing is, there's quite a distance. Again, the deer can't get their head in and get to your shrub and eat it. So it's far enough away to protect that shrub. The middle shrub or the middle tree is on some adjustable posts. So you can actually move up or down your height of your fence, your wire fence. And in this case, we moved it up a bit. So it's not down as far to the ground. It's not on the ground. It's up to the first rung that we could do it. And that's to protect the top of that tree, because that would be deer candy, especially in the winter. And again, it's far enough away so that deer can't necessarily get in there and disturb that tree too much. On the left-hand side, is something that we just came across. It's called a no-dig fence. And for all of you who don't want to put that expensive in-ground install a fence, this is a perfect example for a small garden. This one is 44 inches tall, and it is made of wire fence pieces that interlace. Okay, they have like links that interlace that have holes. Okay, you put a pole down that hole and it holds it in place. So all of those in the middle, you can see that's where the pole is securing it. And then there's a different kind of pole that you can use to lift up and open it up as a door. So you can get in there and actually harvest, you can weed, you can plant, you can do what you need to do without having to necessarily install a huge heavy fence and a very expensive one. But again, it's going to be for a smaller size garden because it's not the, if you get too big, it's going to get wobbly and they can tip it over. So fencing, when we talk about fencing, what do we mean? Well, woven wire and wire mesh are the best. They're durable, they're easy to install, you can follow along, like if you have uneven ground, they're easier to put down with fence posts, etc. But fences for large gardens need to be 7 to 8 feet tall. Now that's interesting because did you know a deer can jump between 6 and 7 feet? If they want something in there, if you've got some tasty food in that large garden of yours, they can jump and get in there, with the exception of a smaller garden or something called a micro garden, something that's 8 feet by 16 feet. They will not jump in there because they can't jump back out. So that's important to know. The smaller of the gardens, you don't have to go as tall. You can go 50 inches because they're not going to be able to jump in and jump out. But if you go taller, or larger, you need to go taller. Now, on the upper garden, one thing to call out, that could even be a somewhat of a larger garden, okay? But a deer is not going to try jumping in there. Do you want to know why? Because if he hits his leg or her leg on one of those side garden areas, they're probably going to have a broken leg and they're not going to be able to get back out. And we know what happens to deer with broken legs. Okay, well, that's another story. Bambi comes to mind, but maybe not. I don't know. So they're not going to, where they have obstacles like that, think that through. If you've got a garden, think it through. Is there an obstacle where they're not going to want to try to jump in and jump out? Okay. Electric fences can be installed. They're expensive and they're usually done on a much larger scale. And you come into whether or not, do I put in one rung or do I put in 2 rungs, each one being more expensive. You have a heavy rain, you have something that happens and your electric fence goes out, you got a shortage. Now you're paying for more maintenance, more expense. Plus, you're going to want to double check with your city or county, wherever, your local ordinance, and make sure you can even put one in. Obviously, I would think in the cities of Brainerd or Baxter, they don't necessarily want you putting them into your property. So I would definitely double check that before spending money on installing an electric fence. Other things to consider, make sure your gates and your doors are sturdy. Make sure that they're strong so that the deer can't just bump them and go in. You'll notice on both of these gardens, up at the top, they've been framed and their garden material, their mesh, has been attached on the inside of those frames. If you're inspecting it, as you should routinely, just to make sure that nothing is happening where a deer is kind of hitting it constantly, creature of habit, I'm going to try to get in there. You'll notice, and you'll be able to go back in and patch it. But if you don't have wood up there, and if you've got a long spanse and they start hitting it, they can probably knock that fencing off of your supports. So something to consider is always double checking that your fence is holding it together. So you can do some deer repellents. You're going to want to apply those repellents in early spring before growth really starts to get forward where damage will then occur. You're going to apply them on a dry day when it's not freezing, temperatures are above freezing, and you're going to reapply it frequently. And by that, I mean every 2 weeks after a heavy rain, or if you're using sprinklers, rain and sprinklers, because these are latex based. They're going to lose through the wetness their potency, and it's going to run off. Or when new growth happens. So in the spring, you're probably going to want to do a little bit more as far as frequency. You're going to treat your young trees completely because again, they can go up to 6 feet. So you're going to want to make sure you're getting those top areas. Older trees, not as much, more so just at the new growth. And of course, repellents are most effective on the items that the deer don't like: dusty miller, Russian sage, lavender, rosemary, all of those items. Read the label before I say applying, read the label before you purchase. Because you don't want to get home and you've bought the wrong thing. Do a little research. You can check any of the university sites as far as that, but read the label then before applying. Should you be applying near vegetable gardens? Very important. So deer become accustomed to smell. That's another reason why you have to reapply frequently. They're accustomed to smell, and many of these being latex based, as they age, the smell diminishes. You're going to want to change that up. So any of the deer products, deer in, deer out of here, whatever you pick, you're going to want to change it up with another product. And if you can find one that happens to have hot peppers or capsaicin as an active ingredient, that's really good because they don't like hot peppers. It doesn't taste so good, and use that. There's a relatively new product called Repellex. We as master gardeners do not promote specific items. We do not promote, but in this case, I'm letting you know about this product because it's relatively new. University of Minnesota has been testing it, has had some positive results. It is in a granular form or a tablet form. You sprinkle it where you don't want the deer. It rains. Guess what? It goes into the earth. It gets caught up by the roots. It's a hot pepper product. They come up, they don't know, they eat it, and it's a hot pepper product. So they're not going to like to eat that. And the good thing about this, it's not something that is gone in 2 weeks. So you're not reapplying it as frequently because it's through the roots, not just on top of the actual plant. Again, scarce food supply and high deer population, it may be a bad year. You're just going to want to protect, and sometimes you're just going to have to grin and bear it and go, okay. But if something's really important, protect it with fencing, netting, whatever. Materials and repellents that work in one area, like I was saying out east, may not work here. They may not work in Baxter, but they work in Brainerd. They may not work with your neighbor, but they may work for you. So deer are different, and different circumstances require different measures. Now, here is a very interesting homemade compliments of Colorado State University Extension. Minnesota also has this on their website. Much more complicated formula. 20% whole eggs, 80% water. I'm not quite sure how you figure out the 20%, so please don't ask me. Guessing you put it in a measuring cup and see what that is. Before you mix those, when you crack that egg, take the white or clear membrane off. And the reason being, because you're going to mix these together and you're going to put it in a sprayer. If you don't take that membrane off, you're going to clog your sprayer. Now, this is stinky. And the longer you let it sit, the stinkier it will get. And we know what they say about gas. It smells like rotten eggs. This is what it's going to smell like, rotten eggs. The longer that you let it sit, it will smell stronger. So you're going to want to apply it on a day when there's probably no wind. And when it's dry. And when it's warm, above freezing, but hopefully by that time you will be well beyond that freezing point. You're going to want to make sure that you don't spray food if it's before harvest time, because it stinks. If you get it on yourself, you're going to want to wash your clothes right away. Okay. And depending upon how long you've let this mixture sit, it might be a little bit longer for you to scrub your body. Hazmat suit might be helpful. I don't know. I'm just saying. You also are going to want to make sure not to have a dinner party that night. Maybe not even leave your windows open. But it's something that has proven to be a relatively good and easy deer repellent. And again, reply every 2 weeks right after a heavy rain. So this is an alternative. This is one of those that you can kind of rotate in. So now let's talk about some questionable deterrents. The first, it may not be questionable. You may have heard about it, you may not have. It does have some short-term benefits, and that is unobtrusive fencing made from monofilament fishing line. It needs to be 30 pounds or greater because of the deer. And it's strung basically at 30 inches and 36 inches. So you can string it between trees. You can put posts down and string it between posts. It'll work short term. You might, if you have posts, then move those posts, because once they figure out, oh, something's here, and they back away, and then they next stand probably about 3 or 4 days down, they're going to have figured it out. They'll know that they just wander down a little bit further and they can get in. But it will help. And if you put it as a temporary barrier and you move it, you're just playing some mind games with that Bambi. Next, motion activated sprinklers. I don't know if any of you have had any experience with these. They're very interesting. A deer will get within its perimeter and it will sound like a gun being cocked. And then as they maybe move a little bit, then the sprinkler goes off. It's a wonderful idea. It's humorous when the humans get involved. And trust me, at our house, the deer rarely got it. I was the recipient, and it was pretty funny because guess who's watching? So they work, but again, and you want to be able to move those around, because leaving them in one spot, even though I could never quite figure out that the habit was there, they'll figure it out. Human hair, this is one that I'm not real sure on. Again, some of these were blog items. I just have to raise them as questionable. Human hair, put in stockings and hung from posts or trees. Motion sensor lights, again, may work short term. For a couple of days when they haven't seen one, remember, they have night blindness, but they'll get used to it. And guess what? Now you've kind of left them the opportunity that, okay, I know that if I kind of put a foot out, it's going to go on, but then I can see what buffet I have beyond there, because now I'm in my darkness. But if you have a light switch where you can turn that light on and off for a couple of days, maybe a week, 2 weeks, and then flip it back on for a couple of days, and maybe you'll have a different series of deer family coming through or whatever. It's an opportunity. You can also do such things as motion sensing noisemaker or predator eyes. I don't know if you've seen those. Those are these little things with the red eyes, and they're basically at about a foot height, and it will scare a deer thinking that it's a fox, etc. Again, if they see it continuously, they'll know that you're just trying to scare them. Mixture of bone meal and blood meal. Shavings from Lifebuoy or Irish Spring, using your greater, the shaving side, you can do that. I've had some friends who have done it around their plants. They swear by it. Again, it could have been deer resistant that year, and the next year could have been deer candy. If you want to try it, homemade pepper sauce. Again, because they don't like hot peppers. Isn't he cute? Rabbits. I don't want to say the bane, but they're almost as bad as deer. And the interesting thing is, as I uncovered with my research, they're a lot like deer. They are active at dawn and dusk. At night, if you shine a flashlight on them, they will show red. Their eyes will show red. They do not hibernate. They're alive all year round. And they don't travel very far from their home. They're within a very short range of an area, usually within a few acres. But again, few acres could be more like a farmland versus in the city where they found their house and they know what you have in your garden. During the day, they like to rest under tree branches, in bushes, in rock piles, in old farm equipment and junk. And in the cold or in the extreme heat, they will find where other mammals have built their little dens and burrows, and they'll go down there and protect themselves that way. That's how they stay warm and or cool. And they survive because they can sit for a very long period of time without moving. So while you think you may not have a deer or a rabbit out underneath that bush, you may not know they could be sitting out there just kind of watching you. So how do I know if it's a rabbit that's eating my plants? Well, their damage is usually a 45-degree angle cut. They have those big teeth. They cut. They don't grasp, but they cut. So you can see that there's actually a cut in that stem of that plant of yours. They will also take large sections of leaves off because, again, they can bite and cut. And on a tree, you will notice the tooth marks, and it's usually about at 2 feet, okay? And it almost looks like a shred, where they're shredding the bark at up to 2 feet. And their tooth or teeth marks, however, is roughly the width of a spoon. So they can make some pretty substantial damage in young trees and other tasty items. So what are the tasty plants? Well, like deer, they love lettuce. You know, it's a salad bar. You know, it's a free-for-all. They're on their diet. It's the summertime. And they'll feast on grasses and clover. Now, they don't necessarily, they feast on young plants of some certain types, but as they get bigger, kale being an example, kale, when it's young, has a different taste than when it's bigger. Once it's grown and kale is being taken for harvest, when many people might be taking it, a rabbit will not touch it because it's not tasteful to them. So again, which ones, you know, the young lettuce, they're going to go after, the kale not, but when the kale's little, they will. And they love soft wood of apple trees, raspberries, blackberries, blueberries, anything that like that, they will go after. So what do? What's their ultimate buffet? Well, like a deer, it's intermix those aromatic herbs, lavenders, rosemary, borage, mint. Add in some geraniums, Joe Pye weed, bee balm, anise hyssop, and wax begonias, and also put in some native plants. Guess what you're also doing? It's a threefold. A, you're protecting your plants. B, you're pushing away these animals. And the third one that we don't even discuss. It's a pollinator heaven. You have just added more pollinators, which now are going to benefit your gardens. Okay, so don't think of it as, I don't really want to plant onions in my garden. Well, maybe they go around the back side. Okay, maybe they're not as pretty, or maybe they are, or maybe that you never thought of lavender as something that you want to grow. It's only an annual here, but you know what? The bees love it, just saying. So think of that, think of the benefits you might be getting just by interplanting some of these other items. And again, they don't like leeks and onions, potatoes, rhubarb, or even hot peppers. So what do we do for them? Well, fencing. The good news is, for a rabbit, it's generally a little bit taller than 2 feet above ground. If you already have a garden bed built and you have some wood, if you can put the fencing on top of that, that would be the best, because now you're just making that a little bit taller from the base of the bed up. The fencing should be no larger than 1 inch square, as shown over on the right-hand side. If you happen to have some fencing that's bigger than that, just overlap it or overlay it so that it is narrowing that gap. If you have 2-inch fencing, now you've made it into 1-inch fencing. And the one thing you'll probably want to do before you consider anything is building or digging 6 to 10 inches below and installing your fence down there, because rabbits will tunnel, as will voles and moles and gophers. So other physical barriers that you can use, consider raising the bed height. That would be another thing, with a fencing around it. Cover the tops. Again, the cloche is a wonderful way if you have some plants that you want to protect as they're first coming up. You'll notice down in the bottom right, like a hoop house or a hoop house, basically. And that's more for if you have a long garden row or some strawberries, because they like strawberries, or some sort of a crop that you have going down that you can then cover with a hoop. In the upper left are apple trees, and you'll notice that they happen to have tubes around them. Those tubes, because they're young and you're protecting that base, 19 to 24 inches and 2 inches away from the tree itself. Again, in that case, to allow the air and the moisture, etc., to protect that tree. And the bottom, you will see that fence or garden fencing is on top of a layer of already done lumber. So other prevention methods: remove brush piles, remove lower branches of overhanging trees. Yeah, that big pine tree might look great, but maybe by removing those very bottom branches, you're protecting the rest of your garden from the bunnies making a home underneath there. Remove rock piles. And one thing that's important, if you happen to have decks, fence those in with some lattice, because they love you. You don't crawl underneath your deck to check for them, do you? That's their home. And it's a safe place, and just like gophers, they can run under, or chipmunks run under there. Repellents, much the same as with deer. Apply in above freezing temperatures on a dry day. Reapply every 2 weeks after a heavy rain or sprinkler, and when new growth appears. Do not apply without checking the label. Do not apply these on your garden of veggies. Make sure that you read the label and whether or not it can be consumed by humans. If it can't, just find out how far away from a garden you should be applying it, and apply outside that perimeter. And always read the label. 2 different types of repellents to look for, 2 different ingredients. One is, it's a taste, and it's rabbit scat, and it's called Zerem. Again, we don't promote certain types, but I grabbed this one because it had the active ingredient of Zerem in it. So if you're looking for something with rabbits to repel rabbits, you're going to look for Zerem. Odor repellents, ammonia soaps. In this case, it was Hinder, and you can see on its label, it says ammonia soaps. Those, again, are items that you can certainly try to repel them away from your landscape or your gardens. You can also try live traps. Check with your city ordinance or your local ordinance, because there may be issues about actually trapping, much less where you can or cannot release those live animals. Pets are a deterrent. Barking dogs They'll usually scare rabbits away. Natural predators, owls and fox, bear and hawks. Yeah, those will scare them away as they come diving for them. Questionable results again, frightening devices like we were saying earlier, noisemakers, flashing lights, ultrasonic noisemakers, fake owls. Rubber snakes, not sure, maybe for a day, I don't know. And glass jars, glass jars filled with water and shiny spinning objects. Like I said, these were all over the internet. These are not necessarily scientific or research-based, other than probably won't work, but if you want to try them, feel free. This is going to be another tab on that spreadsheet. This one is specific to rabbits. And this one has Iowa State, Penn State, and Tufts on it. And you can see that apples, if you look at apples, Iowa State says it's moderate to severe damage. Okay, so you're going to want to protect that apple tree at least in the early stages. Basil is seldom eaten, but beans are moderate to severe damage. So if you're growing those without having some sort of fencing or netting over them, chances are if a rabbit is around you, they'll find it. So we covered a lot. I know that there were some things that might have been new to you. It's kind of been interesting for me, like I said, to find all this information, and yet to find that the deer and rabbits were very similar, very similar on how to take care of them, what they liked, how to exclude them, etc. Their habitat, their damage identification. How do you know which one's which? Creating an alternate buffet. That was interesting to me. What to plant, where, and how to protect my other plants. What could I do? What are the tasty plants? Those ones that are just saying, come on in, have a buffet. And then damage control, deterrence and prevention. So we've covered quite a bit. With that, I want to show you the resources. Those were just a few, majority of them. All of them are universities or institutions that really are respectable and have a lot of information. This was just deer, here are rabbits. So it was a lot of fine tuning to really find out what was the best way to handle this. And as I said earlier in the presentation, or Brittany said, I've been a master gardener and been in the program since 2019. And I encourage you, if you have any interest in joining us, we really would welcome you. We have 7 priorities. One is local food, growing local food and helping various organizations throughout our county. Climate change, being aware of what's impacting our climate. What can we do to prevent climate change, or how can we work, what can we do to work against slowing it down? Nearby nature, deer and rabbits, understanding their habitat and what you can and can't do. Clean water, what's impacting our lakes, which is so important up here. What is runoff? What not only impacts our lake and our fish, but what can we do for restoration around our various lake shores? Pollinators, extremely important for everything we do, whether it's garden, whether it's lawn. Pollinators are there and we need to protect them. And how do we protect them? Biodiversity, we don't want to have a monoculture. Without pollinators, who knows? But we want to figure out how to work with nature and how we can create the best for everybody, for the planet. And of course, horticulture skills. What are the best practices to do when you're gardening, with trees, whatever? So if any of these interest you, or if they will interest you, we welcome you. We welcome you to come and join us. If you have a question about anything about gardening, you can reach out to us at Ask a Master Gardener via either phone at our Crow Wing County helpline, or via email. If you send an email and your question kind of says, what is this? Or this is what I'm experiencing, a picture is 1,000 words. Send a picture so that when they get it and tell us what it is, you know, what you're experiencing, what's your question? It's an apple tree, it's 10 years old, whatever. And someone from our Master Gardener group will get back to you with information. May have some more questions, but we'll get back with you as to information that you're asking. We also encourage you to follow us on Facebook. We have a brand new media and marketing team with us. We're excited. Our Facebook page has some wonderful information, not only of what we Master Gardeners are doing throughout the county, but tips and tricks. Tips about what to be doing this month, or did you know this plant, or this is a great. And so follow us and see what they have to offer to you. Additionally, watch us on YouTube. There are presentations out there that might be of interest to you. We encourage you to check them out and see if there's something that we can help you with. So with that, I'm going to close my part of the presentation, and hopefully nobody has any really scary questions for me. Do you have any questions? Yes.
Some of the fencing that is, you have shown, have a wooden ring around to kind of stabilize it at the bottom.
Mhm.
Is it safe to use treated lumber next to your garden?
Yes. So the question is using treated lumber around your garden for fencing, etc. And yes, it is. There have been studies on that, and yes, you can. In fact, we garden out at the Northland Arboretum. We have several gardens, and there was discussion about using treated lumber, and yes, it is actually been deemed safe. Any other questions? Or Brittany in the chat?
We had a question on using the hot pepper, the
Cat, yep.
in vegetable gardens. Will the vegetables take up the hot pepper taste?
Well, I would say one of two things. Are you spraying it on? If you're spraying it on, probably not. If you're using something that is of a spray, you're making your own, probably not, because it's not in necessarily in the roots. The Repellex, it might be pulling it up and impacting
Repellex is not recommended for vegetables.
for vegetable gardens, yeah. So Repellex would be outside. It's not in your vegetable gardens. Anything else?
Another question was kind of interesting, and there was some talk in the chat about it. Somebody's installing a bee lawn,
Mhm.
and they're worried that that will attract more rabbits. And then another master gardener from Duluth responded that research so far has shown that it it's kind of like the alternate buffet that you mentioned. So if you want to speak to that more, or have
That's
anything to add to that.
Very good question. I'm hoping everybody on, well, chat has probably seen it. It's about bee lawn, installing it, and whether or not that becomes the alternate buffet or the welcome to the buffet. And I would probably say it depends. I honestly do not know the answer to that. I would say it probably depends. What do you have as far as your population around your area? And what other items do you have that might be tasty? And they wouldn't, whether deer or rabbits, excuse me, that might cause them to go elsewhere. So it depends. And I'm not the expert on that one. That is an excellent question. That I did not uncover at all.
And I think that was all the questions in the chat.
Okay. Good.
There was a couple on the fencing, but you kind of covered that as you went along.
Okay,
So, yeah.
terrific. Thank you. Yes.
So do you have any experience with using that organic fertilizer, Milorganite, or I'm not sure if that's how you pronounce it, that help keep deer away?
I have not, but I have my husband here who just said that he has had some experience using this organic fertilizer to keep the deer away. So I'm going to let him, Dan, if you want to, just so that people can hear you up here. I apologize. He is my other alternative research-based person.
So, yes, Milorganite does work, but it is a biological product that, after a rain or any, time will break down and lose its effectiveness. So you have to keep reapplying it all the time. In fact, you have to reapply it probably sooner than every couple of weeks because it does break down so fast.
It's another product you don't want to have a party shortly after putting it down.
That is correct. It's very, very stinky.
Okay. Well, with that, thank you all for joining us. I hope you have a nugget to take home with you. And maybe this year will be a non-buffet meal at your house. Have a great day. Thank you.